Hey guys, Mark Jesse here. I posted a video about a week ago where I suggested that when the probable cause affidavit was released, that I thought a lot of the internet detectives and sleuthing that has gone on in this case was probably going to shock some people. I hypothesized that they must have found something at Richard Allen's house that directly tied him to the murders of the girls because he was in short order arrested right after the search. Apparently, it turns out that they recovered a 6 Sauer P226 40 caliber handgun from his residence. And what we didn't know was laying 2 feet from one of the girls' bodies was an unspent 40 caliber round, which they claim the extraction marks on that shell casing match samples taken from his gun. Now, if you're not familiar with how a gun works, when you have a bullet, and it's in a magazine, and you pull the slide back and it comes forward, it pushes the bullet into the barrel of the gun, and normally when the gun fires, there's like a little hook. It's called the extractor, and it catches the little rim of the shell casing. The extractor is hard, tool hardened metal. The shell casings are normally made of some type of brass. And as it pulls that shell out of the barrel, it kicks it out, goes to the ground. And so if you have a shell, even if it hadn't been fired, the forcing it into the seated position where it is about to fire puts microscopic scratches on the shell casing, which match, the barrel of the particular weapon. And the extractor, when it gets a hold and pulls out, it leaves scratches. And there are lots of arguments about how similar or dissimilar two different weapons might leave, kind of a tool mark that is distinct to that particular weapon. I've got some rifles, and I have noticed, I reload shells to do long-range shooting, that I can actually, just by eyeball, when I pull a case out of one of my rifles, I have a batch of them. These, of course, are fired shells, but I can just look and see the firing pin mark on the primer, and I can actually tell which shell came out of which of my guns, because each of them are slightly different. Now, I don't know if you went and got 10 Sig Sauer P226s off the assembly line and ran a bunch of shells through them and put them into a pile. I'm not sure whether an expert would actually be able to sort and connect those all to a particular weapon. The FBI has come under scrutiny and criticism that they sometimes, their definition of what a match is not necessarily scientifically repeatable, which leads to the term that, well, it's a subjective opinion of the examiner based on his training and experience. But it's sort of like hair and fiber analysis. You can say that two things look very similar, but to say it's an exact match, that's a whole nother level of specificity. And you can absolutely bet that that's going to be a heated contention if this case goes to trial. But all right, let's assume for the sake of argument that Richard Allen did this, that he was on the Monon High Bridge that day, that he came into contact with these girls, that he's the one saying girls down the hill, that's him on the video. Let's assume that he marches them down the hill and ultimately himself, or with the help of somebody else, kills the girls, and that everything in the probable cause affidavit that points to him is absolutely correct. I thought, when I saw the probable cause affidavit, that it was going to answer a lot of questions, and it did, but it actually raises a whole lot more questions that, to me, just common sense would dictate ought to be answered. And I find this case, the more I dig into it and the more I look at it, the more interesting it becomes. And I'm just going to go over a couple of those with you, if you're interested. One question I would have is, why did Richard Allen go to the bridge that day? Was that something he routinely did? Did he go for a walk out there 3 times a week? If so, for him to show up there on that day and go for a walk where he might have just randomly encountered these girls, that's important to know. What if he had never been to the Monon High Bridge ever? This was his first and only time there. That seems telling that he went there for a purpose on that particular day. That suggests that he knows the girls were going to be there. If he was just out for a random walk, why would he park his car at the CPS building? I get that there's different parking spaces for different trails, and maybe it was just, but it does seem weird that he would park his vehicle at what they call the abandoned CPS building. Their talk about it was backed in, so you couldn't read the license plate number. I don't necessarily think that maybe that's what he was doing, but I do think parking over at the CPS building instead of the parking lot that's right there nearby the Freedom Bridge area where there is parking does make it seem like he was trying to separate his vehicle and himself from whoever might be on the trail that day. But that's interesting, though. That means at the moment he parked his car, he was planning to do something, right? And of course, we know that what he ultimately did was apparently ordered these girls down the hill at gunpoint. But that suggests he knew they were going to be there. And this is not a crime of opportunity where he was sitting in the parking lot and he sees 2 unattended young females get out and go down the trail, and at that juncture maybe he was motivated to get out of his car and follow them, because he arrived at the Monon High Bridge trail before the girls ever got there. So we're back to, there's like this Y in the road. Is this just a happenstance that he just happened to run into these 2 girls and then something bad happened? Or did he go there with a plan and a purpose? And you have to pick kind of one or the other. And so then you have to start looking at the evidence about how does it support one of those theories versus the others. He was on the bridge, standing on platform 1 before the girls got to the bridge. There is the adult female walker who says when she got to the start of the bridge, she saw him, or a man matching his description in clothing, height, weight, whatever. But let's assume for the sake of argument that was Richard, standing on the little, there's the little outcroppings from the bridge. He was on number 1, and that she turned around and started walking back to her car. She says that she passed 2 young girls that she believes were Abby and Libby. Let's assume they were. Assuming that's true, Richard was already at the bridge or on the bridge as they were approaching the bridge. So that means the girls either had to pass him, or he somehow ducked off into the woods, waited for them to come past, and came back up. And again, that's an important issue to know, is if he's at the bridge at a certain date and time because he's intending to meet with them, well, that suggests a whole bunch of possibilities. And now we're back to since Keegan Kline used the Anthony Schatz catfishing account to get them out there. I mean, they had supposedly a meeting set up that day for about 3 o'clock. So it might make sense that if Richard somehow knew that, he was going to show up and intercept them, right? But if he didn't know that these girls were coming, there was no pre-planning, think about what that means. That means he was just out at the park, going for a walk, that he'd taken his pistol with him, which, okay, lots of people who go out in the country and stuff carry a firearm, nothing against that. But he somehow, in an instant, walked past them. They were headed for the bridge. He was headed back to his car. And in an instant, I guess he decided he was going to do what? He was going to kidnap them and take them away and do something with them. He was going to sexually abuse them. I mean, it's very curious. If you put yourself in the position of Richard Allen, that you're just out for a walk that day and you just happen to go past a couple of girls, how quickly, the psychopathic mind of a guy that in an instant he just formulates, he's going to spin around. That kind of foretells that maybe he's thought about this in the past, because it just seems that it wasn't just random, right? And it doesn't seem random because we go back to he had already parked his car at the CPS building, which kind of implies he was planning to do something. I have questions about, did he tell anybody I'm going to the park? Did he tell his wife, hey, I'm going for a walk at the park? Did he not tell anybody? Does his cell phone records show that he called anybody while he was out on the trail, anywhere from 2 to 5 o'clock? That seems awful interesting. If it was kind of normal for him to go for a walk, every couple of days over at the Monon High Trail, then, maybe this is just some kind of weird happenstance. It all just, terrible set of facts and it just happened quick and fast. I don't know. I'm also, if he had it all planned out, for him to take them off the bridge and cross the river onto the other side, that water in that river area is at least knee deep. In some places it is chest deep. And I realize there's kind of like a sandbar. I've looked at the aerial photos and things. There's like a sandbar where you can kind of get across the more shallow area of the river. But we're talking February in Indiana. And it was a nice day, but the water would have been freezing cold. And I find it hard to believe that anyone would plan that we're going to go down the hill and cross the river. And it makes me wonder whether he was taking them off the trail. Maybe they made a run for it and crossed the river, and he had to then, therefore, chase after them. If you listen to the radio traffic from the helicopter, there's a couple videos where the helicopter's flying around, not really doing a whole lot of anything. And there's radio traffic, but on some of that radio traffic, one of the sheriff's officers says he needs an evidence bag brought to him. And they ask him, where are you? And he says, I'm underneath the bridge. And when they ask him, what did you find? He says, he's kind of hesitant, but then he says, it's a female's undergarment. I would have a question. Did that match Libby or Abby's undergarments? Was it a pair of panties? Did it belong to the girls? Because that would suggest maybe something, he just took them down and under the bridge where something happened and then they ran off into the woods. I don't know. I saw an interview of the older sister who was up on the trail, and they claimed that they found one of the girls' shoes at the edge of the river, like she'd run out of her shoe or got it stuck in the mud or something. And it was I think they said a black Nike tennis shoe. Again, if this was all pre-planned, it doesn't make sense to me to go down off the bridge, cross the water, kill the girls, and then the easy exit strategy is, of course, to go up to the highway and walk back to your car. But that puts you at serious risk that somebody's going to see you. And apparently a witness saw a bloody and muddy man walking down the street right about the time he would have been exiting the scene. So there are things about this case that make you think it was all pre-planned and he had foreknowledge. And there's also parts of it that are very chaotic and don't make any sense at all. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me at all is you can gather from reading the probable cause affidavit that they've talked to a good variety of people that were out there that day. Now, I'm sure there may have been some other people and maybe they didn't see anything, so they're not listed. But of the witnesses who claim they saw something that are listed in the affidavit, they all repetitively describe Richard Allen and what he was wearing and the video of Bridge Guy, blue jeans, blue jacket, hoodie, hands in pocket. They're all describing the same person. The three girls who were walking back to the Freedom Bridge who said he was like creepy and went past them. There is one witness that says she saw a guy and he was wearing all black jacket, black pants, black boots. Eyewitness testimony is a funny thing, and there are times you pass somebody and he was wearing all of one basic color, but then the witness gets the color wrong. And so a lot of people are jumping on, there were two people. There was this Richard Allen who was described as wearing blue jacket, blue pants, black hoodie. And then there was this second guy described and he's wearing all black. And that must have been, Keegan Kline's dad or something. And I'm not certain they're not all describing, excuse me, the same person. But sometimes witnesses do that where they kind of have a recollection that the guy was wearing all of one solid color, but in their head they get it mixed up and end up describing it as all black when it was all blue. That is interesting, and I'm sure hopefully we'll figure that out as more evidence comes around. But what I don't understand is Richard Allen went to the police, said I was there that day, said I was wearing blue jacket, blue jeans. They have the video within 48 hours of the girls being killed. And it's a guy in a blue jacket and blue pants. It, from a distance, appears to be, the shape and size of Richard Allen. It matches the description of Richard Allen. It matches Richard Allen's description of his own clothing. It matches the 3 girls that saw a guy, creepy guy, by the Freedom Bridge. It matches the description of the lady that was out for the walk that says she saw him standing on the first little, offshoot from the bridge. And so it doesn't appear that anybody else really saw anybody out there on the trail that day. And it took 5 years to somehow go back and go, oh, you know what? This guy, Richard Allen, looks just like the sketch. This guy, Richard Allen, is wearing what all the other witnesses are describing and appears to be the person on the phone video. It just blows and baffles my mind. And I don't know if they got so sidetracked by when they found the girls on Ron's property that they were just sure it was Ron, so they chased him for a while, and then they got off on this tangent with Keegan Kline and, the Anthony Schatz account that was clearly talking to these girls. But I have more questions now that I've read the probable cause affidavit, not about did he do it or was he connected, but about how this all went down, because there's just so many unanswered questions, and there's so many obvious questions that didn't get asked and haven't been followed up on. Did they, have they got his phone records to see if his phone was pinging in that area? And with cell phone pinging, sometimes it's very generic that you're within a mile of a cell phone tower, and there's other times it is super specific. I watched a YouTube video where a guy went out and his wife was up at the cemetery and he was down in the area where they found the girls, and his phone was kind of switching between towers and showing that he was in places he really wasn't, and that just happens with GPS and hilly areas and obstructions and things. But there are times where GPS is like super specific. And I'll be curious to see if it's not too late to go back and get cell phone records that are now at this point going on 5 years old. But it just really, there's more questions. If Richard Allen left the area at about 4 o'clock, it's a 5-minute drive back over to his house. When he got home, was his wife home? When he got home, was he the only one there? Did he go home? I don't know. It's just super fascinating to me. And I have more questions now that I've read the probable cause affidavit than I had before all that, because I thought it was going to fit in this tight, neat little package, and it's all over the place. Makes you wonder what else there is we don't know. I guess we'll find out as time goes by.